name's Daniel Ball. I'm one of the founding directors of Wax Digital, and this morning I'm going to be covering a couple of subjects, really. First, a recent research study that we did into procurement attitudes towards innovation and what that's shown us about the function. And then following that, a specific focus on one of those innovation areas, one that we see a lot of interest in from procurement professionals and finance professionals currently, which is supplier management. So those of you who are here for the State of Flux session that's just finished will be fully jammed up on supplier management by the end of it. Just very briefly, before I get into that, to kick off, I just want to give a very brief overview of our product suite. We offer a pretty broad procurement technology suite, covers everything from source to pay in a fully integrated package. So it's single code base, all designed, developed, delivered by us out of our Manchester head office. Everything from spend analysis through sourcing, savings tracking, contracts, supplier management, and of course purchase to pay. And because there are quite a number of vendors here today that have broadly similar propositions, similar looking technology suites, I'd just like to give you three things that I think probably make us a bit different from the rest of the vendors that you might see. First of those is that very cohesive suite. It is, again, a single code base. We're not a business that's grown by acquisition. We've organically grown that solution suite over the course of the last 15 years or so. Equally strong, I would say, in both upstream and downstream procurement areas as well. Integration is our second key, I suppose, strength or differentiator. We're the only provider in this space to have developed what we call our own integration platform as a service, which is a way of putting integration really into our clients' hands, kind of demystifying it, stopping it from being this black box, very complex kind of process to one that's much more transparent and that you have much more control over as a customer of ours. And then finally, innovation, and I'll be talking a lot about innovation for the next 20 minutes or so, but just to give you sort of some idea of what we've done just in the last year alone as an example. So we've extended quarterly releases across our entire product suite. So we've had quarterly releases to all customers across our product suite, or large parts of it, for quite a long time. It's now across every single module that we do, so it's a living, breathing software suite that's continually upgraded. We've introduced new or completely upgraded modules for savings tracker and for supplier relationship management, more of which later. We've enhanced what we call our Super SaaS capability. So that really is about how we deliver solutions to give clients all the benefits of software as a service, that constant upgrade, everybody on the single code base, everybody benefiting from the same releases and innovations, but across a variety of different hosting models. So everything from Microsoft Azure in the cloud to very highly secure, military level security really for customers in financial services and defense and aerospace and areas like that. We've brought on stream our Connect product, or really the next iteration of it, which is our integration platform as a service, enhanced our data cubing and modeling capabilities through Power BI, and introduced what we call a best practice network, which really is a sort of an integrated client ecosystem for clients to be able to share ideas, knowledge, best practice, and so on. So innovation really is at the heart of what we do and what we see as our responsibility to our clients, really. But how well aligned is that with our customers, I guess? Sorry for the hackneyed Steve Jobs quote, but it does make a point that I'd like to make, which is while it's key for us as a tech business to be a leader rather than a follower, it does raise an interesting question for procurement, and that is, what does innovation mean to procurement? Do procurement professionals really want to innovate? And by extension, obviously lead, according to this quote at any rate, or does this militate against the collaborative impulse that drives so much of procurement behavior? So we asked the question. We asked 100 procurement heads in UK businesses. We asked, what does innovation mean to procurement? Would you consider yourself innovative or more of a key collaborator within the organization? Is your business an innovator? And how does your team work within that business to innovate? We looked at four key areas. So firstly, business. What are the characteristics of an innovative business and what's procurement's view of this? We looked at procurement function itself, so what's procurement's focus, and what are the barriers to innovation within procurement, if indeed there are any barriers to innovation within procurement. We also looked at soft skills, so the personality attributes of procurement heads, and also what they're looking for in their team. What is it that procurement heads value in terms of the people that make up the procurement function? And finally, technology, of course. What's the procurement's current and future focus and priorities in technology terms? So So straight out of the gate, what we found was that very clearly procurement does have a picture of itself as being an innovator, an innovative function. Just under 70% already feel that procurement plays a key role in business, helping the business to innovate. And then looking forwards, that picture becomes kind of even more pronounced, with 80% expecting to see procurement playing a central role in tomorrow's development and innovation within the business. So it's very apparent that procurement wants to be, or even feels that it already is, an innovator within business. But what's really interesting against that background is the contrasting message that we see when we asked about the detail of what it means to be an innovator. And this is where we begin to see a disparity between procurement aspirations on the one hand and natural tendencies on the other. So when we asked, what does it mean to be an innovative business? What constitutes innovation? The top responses that came back saw, again from procurement professionals, innovative businesses characterized as having a clear business vision, being able to react quickly to market and customers, and reviewing and improving processes. So really charting a steady path, if you like. Whereas the bottom choices are a commitment to technology investment, right? A willingness to take risks and a high investment in R&D. And this is where you have that interesting contrast between true innovation, which has an element of risk-taking about it, and the natural tendency for procurement against risk, in fact, as the guardians of risk within the organization. And so favoring safe innovation, if you like, or that which can be achieved with a degree of comfort. So those findings really beg the question whether procurement's focused in the right areas to genuinely deliver an innovation agenda, whether the function is capable of leading the wider business, or is it actually just content simply to support somebody else's innovation agenda? And those questions are further brought to mind when we look at the priorities for the function. So we asked what procurement leaders and their teams are focused on, what they see as their main activities and concerns today. And we get a pretty broad spread of responses here, but some interesting themes come through highlighted, and I've tried to pick those out in orange here. So if you look at some of the most popular responses, then you've got things like increasing profitability, becoming a leading business function, moving from administrator to strategic advisor. They're all pretty aspirational responses. Again, they show procurement with a vision of itself as being a broader strategic part of the business, rather than a more narrow procurement focus in terms of those responses. So procurement perhaps is willing to step out of its departmental comfort zone and think bigger business picture. But it's interesting still to note that right at the very bottom again, the least popular response was challenging business objectives, comes dead last. So procurement wants to be seen as an innovator, so long as perhaps that doesn't involve rocking the boat too much. Okay, so let's look at where procurement heads are going, where they're looking to the future, and see what that tells us about innovation for procurement. Is this picture any different going forward? And again, we see the focus for procurement on collaboration. So innovation seen as a means to build closer relationships between buyer and supplier, particularly. There's a focus on supplier relationships, on collaboration tools, and on risk management. And the weightings really here indicate that there are fewer gains to be made these days, I guess, in transactional process improvement. Administrative processes, they're increasingly in hand. And procurement focus seems to be shifting to exploring better ways to manage and control suppliers. And the results here, I don't know if echoing the presentation that just went before, show that investment in technology to support that focus, that supplier relationship management, supplier collaboration focus, is still at a fairly basic level. We're quite a long way behind where we want to be able to support procurement's aspirations to collaborate more efficiently and effectively with suppliers. And that comes through again, if we ask about key innovation areas in the next 2 years. So interesting from our perspective as a technology provider, if we dig more deeply into how it translates into an appetite for new technology within the procurement function, it again really underpins the notion of collaboration and a move from the transactional to the relational. So we asked about key innovation areas and investment plans, and they pretty clearly show that the market appetite for solutions that support supplier and data management, also the outcomes from those activities as well, so savings tracking as well, communicating that back to the rest of the business, because even after all this time, I guess there's a much greater recognition that savings are actually a byproduct of good procurement practice rather than an end in themselves, but they're still the key metric for most organisations. So notwithstanding sort of the natural tendency or the tension between innovation and risk aversion, are there any other forces that stand in the way of procurement really driving innovation and delivering on its aspirations? Well, what isn't surprising to us, but is still a little disheartening, is that the findings here really underline those in another research piece that we conducted last year, the CPO research report. And that took a deep look into the view procurement had of itself and the value that it brings to the business, and what other business departments within the organisation equally thought of that value that procurement brings. So we looked at IT and finance and sales and marketing and effectively asked them, how big a contribution do you feel that procurement makes to the organisation, to its strategic objectives, to moving the business forward? And what we found was that there was a big disparity between the value that procurement placed on its own activities and the value that other organisations or other departments within the business also placed on procurement's contribution. And that's a finding we see repeated here, to be fair. So the internal business perception of procurement is considered far and away the biggest barrier to procurement innovating, taking centre stage in the business innovation agenda. Beyond this, you've got skill shortages, you've got time-consuming processes are most commonly blamed. So, it seems that many in the procurement are still dealing with some of the basic issues in order to create an innovation path. What is encouraging on the flip side is that actually getting hold of budget and access to technology are not really seen as limiting factors. They come right down at the bottom there. So the tools can be brought to bear, but changing perceptions remains a key battleground. And again, an open question here is, does this kind of response suggest that procurement isn't very well furnished to take that battle to the business because it's naturally a collaborator rather than a leader in the way that other, perhaps more assertive departments might be? And lo and behold, again, the top soft skill prioritized by procurement professionals within their teams, so looking at the people that they employ, the characteristics that they seek out when building out the function, is collaboration. Whilst again, we see kind of a carbon copy of the earlier results with the employee profiling skills such as challenging and managerial coming at the very bottom of the scale. So that's not what procurement professionals are looking for in their teams. So we see a very consistent picture around that. And then the final quadrant of the research that we undertook was to ask, again, those 100 procurement professionals about their attitudes to technology as an innovation enabler. Now, innovation isn't, of course, predicated on technology, as we've already discussed. To innovate can involve processes and soft skills, but how does technology play its part, and can it support innovation, or does it just consume attention? From our experience working with organisations across the globe of all sizes, it's evident that technology and making the right choices is pretty pivotal in success, and that view is certainly echoed in the results. So we see 85% of procurement professionals surveyed saying that procurement technology is vital to the department achieving its own internal goals. And perhaps more surprising, actually 3/4 of those surveyed saying that technology, and procurement technology in particular, was of utmost or very importance to meet the broader business goals, with just 4% saying that it's not important. And where were those respondents focused in terms of their sort of key areas for future technology investment? Well, it came down really to these 4 quadrants. So analytics and data, and that's a whole other seminar topic, which I think we'll come to possibly next time. Integration and cloud. And then the key subject area that I want to focus on in the time I've got left, which is supplier management, and really perhaps the most popular response, I guess, in terms of where people are looking to actually take procurement functions to the next level. So I look at 2 facets of supplier management, starting with supplier information management. And I'll try and do that by way of a case study. So here we have a customer that we're working with currently. They've got 1,500 suppliers, about 120 million of spend. Very, very international business, so operating in 51 countries worldwide. A lot of blue chip clients, highly complex supplier capability matrices, works in print production, so they have to have a very detailed understanding of their supplier capabilities in order to be able to meet customer requirements. Because the clients are in those sectors, so particularly pharma, financial services, the entire supply chain has to meet certain relevant accreditations. They have to be ISO 27001. They have to be accredited to certain levels. So our client's on the hook effectively for making sure that its suppliers are adequately certified and qualified to the correct standards. Otherwise, they're in breach of their contract to their customers. So managing and controlling and understanding and monitoring that supply chain is really important to them. That means several things. It means masses of paperwork. They have to send out emails, Word documents, letterheads, spreadsheets to collect all of the data that they need from their suppliers to be able to understand whether or not they're capable of meeting their print production requirements in Brazil, in Australia, in France, wherever it might happen to be. And of course, that fact of them being in Australia, in Brazil, in France, and so on, adds a further level of complication and overhead to that whole process. And then once they've got all of that data, it needs to go through internal, so again, via email typically, so no audit trail, very difficult to actually look back to and see who's said yes to what. Needs to be manually keyed into a mix of back office systems, hopefully without error, but with the adequate assurances that they meet the necessary standards. So getting new supplier information into those back office systems is a massive overhead in itself. It's a very difficult, arduous, expensive and time-consuming process. And of course, even once you've got all that information in place, it dates very quickly. Within weeks or months, you're out of date. You don't know whether that accreditation that was provided back then is still relevant or not. And managing that across 1,500 suppliers is no small task. So supplier information management transforms that process by taking it online, by putting all of the data provisioning and management into the hands of the supplier. So you've got highly configurable registration forms which react to things such as the location, the category, the financial standing of the supplier, to present a personalized set of onboarding questionnaires specific to the nature of that supplier. So questionnaires which are sequenced then through a number of different process gates. So the first might just allow for suppliers, for example, to engage in sourcing activities. So you might be able to invite them to tenders or auctions once they've been through the first gate. But then to actually trade with them as a business, they have to go through subsequent gates. So the second might be signing up to an NDA and providing some more detailed account information. The third, gathering all of their key trading data, so bank account information and so on. The fourth, the detailed capabilities data. So in this case, because it's print outsourcing, things like, what are their color management capabilities, their processing volumes, their cutting and packing capabilities, and so on, all with appropriate approvals between each gate. So you're collecting increasingly detailed and rich data as you go through that process and getting it approved singly, centrally, all fully auditable at the same time. So the result is an incredibly rich set of data, tailored to different suppliers across the supply chain, subsets of which are then automatically distributed to the relevant back office systems, both when new suppliers are set up and when suppliers subsequently change their details. So you get the relevant information passed straight through to the finance system, to the print production system, and so on as required. Again, automatically as soon as suppliers update or enter their details into that system, so long as obviously you've got approvals. And there's a really clear-cut case for investment here. The economic payback for supplier information management is really quite straightforward, and it's one that's actually pretty easy to get finance to buy into, which can often be a challenge, as we well know, dealing primarily in procurement software. Actually in this case, a lot of that management burden tends to fall on the AP and the finance team, so they tend to be quite supportive of actually initiatives that can ease that burden on them as a team. So if you just draw on a simple matrix, which presumes, let's say, a pretty conservative 3 hours per supplier to set up, with an overhead cost of just £25 an hour, and a really conservative 1 hour per year at the same rate to actually manage that supplier information over the course of the next 12 months when it changes its address or telephone number or bank account details or whatever it happens to be. And in that organization, if we assume that it adds one new supplier per working day and has a couple of thousand active suppliers in total, then you can see that it's costing upwards of £70,000 a year just to onboard, maintain and manage supplier details. Now, obviously, taking that out, it's not a direct cost saving unless, of course, you reduce headcount as a result. But it does simply clearly and demonstrate the scale of the process that supplier information management can easily solve. And that's before you even get into the wider benefits, the ancillary benefits of a self-policing, accurate data set that's kept constantly up to date, where suppliers are alerted to the fact that your professional indemnity insurance has run out. Please give us your new certificate, otherwise your account will be put on hold. Your ISO 27001 is due for renewal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're taking all of that risk out of the supply chain, where I'm on the hook to Pfizer, because that's my client, to ensure that my suppliers that are working on their behalf are actually ISO 27001 compliant, and I've no idea because I signed them up 3 years ago and nobody's asked them the question since. So, all of those benefits come into play. Very clear financial benefit, and of course SIM sets us up nicely for its sibling, which is supplier relationship management. And when we talk about supplier relationship management, really what we're talking about today, I think, is a process of what you might call mass customization. And by that we mean a highly automated system for applying what we call processes to different tiers of the supply chain, which are, again, self-identified as part of supplier onboarding. So the two work very much hand in glove. You know, we've got a supplier onboarding process which can pretty well tell us whether this is a tier one critical supplier, whether it's a leverage supplier, whether it's just a tactical supplier. So when the supplier passes through those registration gates, it's automatically proposed to SRM as being A, B, C, or D, whatever the number of tiers or the level of tiering that you want to apply that fits in with your resourcing capabilities. But then you want to be able to tailor those automatically assigned processes to account for the fact that an IT outsource provider, for example, and a facilities management partner are both classified as tier one critical suppliers, but really for very different reasons. And as a result, they actually take subtly different, or even possibly quite substantially different management programs with them. So they'll automatically have a tier one category process applied to them, but you want to be able to move that around such that you can recognize that they're actually very different suppliers. They just happen both to be critical, even though they do both provide monitors. So a good SRM system automatically applies that standard process to a supplier based on its allocated tier, applying a whole series of activities and control and review measures, all automatically policed and centrally controlled and maintained, and audited, of course. Those activities, things like meetings management, things like internal questionnaires, supplier questionnaires, scorecard building, scorecard analysis, risk management, and auditing. But allowing that process then to be completely reconfigured on a supplier by supplier basis as necessary. So you get both the scale and the ability to deal with large scale of suppliers, but the ability to deal on a micro level as well. That then gives you that 360-degree view of each supplier, sort of especially in your upper tiers, of course, tracing their key capabilities, understanding what your stakeholders think of them and what they think of you as a customer, and how you can iteratively build a closer, more effective relationship and ultimately ensure best value with lowest risk. And good SRM software helps make the whole management package much easier. It's not easy because SRM isn't easy. It takes focus and time and effort, but certainly a lot easier. So all well and good practice, but in the past, a lot of IT budget holders have seen the business case for broader relationship aspect of supplier management as just a bit too fluffy. It's about building relationships, it's about better understanding, it's about lower risk. So the return is more about loss prevention than it is actually about cost reduction or increasing profitability. And well, it might never happen. We may never have a supply chain failure. It's a bit like the insurance, do we, don't we buy into that. And a lot of times people don't. The exception to that's been in the more highly regulated industries, defense, aerospace, financial services, where supply chain risk has a very obvious and potentially very dramatic impact on the organization. But that really shouldn't be the case, I don't think, because the risk profiles of businesses in different industry sectors vary greatly. Building that business case does often have to refer back to history, to your particular business history, what's happened in the past. Have we experienced any lost revenues, incurred costs, challenges created by supplier disruption that could have been avoided if we'd had a decent SRM program supported by a decent software package in place. But you can put together a simple probability forecast that kind of quantifies the likelihood of a supply chain failure or fine and the potential impact of that failure or fine on the business. And that can show quite clearly the business value that's protected, if you like, by effective SRM. So in this case, the impact of a major supply chain outage or event costs the business about £2.5 million, let's say. And we're forecasting that without the right controls, looking back over history, this tells us this organization has had these situations in the past, we might expect that to happen once every 8 years or so. So the annual cost of risk to us as a business on that basis is £375,000 a year. So you're suddenly quantifying what is a very nebulous kind of concept in very hard financial terms to the organization, on the basis that if we don't do something, then the probability is that we will have a major supply chain issue once every X years. And as ever, the softer benefits also are very compelling, if slightly more difficult to perhaps convey to C-suite executives. But helping building trust, understanding, openness between buyer and suppliers can lead to actually some of the most important paybacks. Supplier investments, suppliers going beyond their stated contract terms and coming to you with new ideas first. So if you're thinking about supplier information management or relationship management and you're looking for some stats on the return on investment case, then do drop by our stand and ask for a copy of our business case for upstream procurement software or our supplier relationship management product paper or anything else that we can furnish you with. We'd be very happy to have a chat about what we think best practice looks like and how we might be able to help you along the journey. Also, while you're there, if you're so inclined, you can take a look at our procurement personality quiz, because one of the outcomes we saw from the research we did was that there are some very distinct profiles in respect to procurement attitudes to innovation and the role of procurement in the business, to be honest, spanning the gamut from what we've termed a pragmatic professional, someone likely to focus on the tactical business support rather than push the boundaries, but who still sees value in applying innovative thinking to make a difference at key pressure points, right through to kind of the high-level visionary people that have taken procurement to the next level and are stretching the limits of technology and process investment. So if you're keen to find out and don't already know what kind of procurement professional you are, then please come along to our stand, take the quiz, and we'll be able to tell you. And if that wasn't enough to tempt you, we've also got an Oculus Rift virtual reality headset on our stand, which is well worth a look, to be honest. It is quite amazing. So do please come along, see us in the exhibition hall, take a look at that and talk to us about supplier information management, relationship management, or anything else across the suite of products that we do. Thank you very much for your time this morning.